afternoon. Welcome to EduCert Network. Friend, as you know, today we have a lecture on cultural value and its manifestation in 21st century. We will try to understand culture in a perspectives, what does it mean and how it's going to impact the society and vice versa. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio Dr. Anand Vardhan. He teaches at Delhi Institute of Heritage and Research, and he is a scholar on this very topic and writes frequently different newspaper and journals on these issues. So I hope his knowledge will help us to understand the cultural values in a new perspective. So on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Vardhan for the EduCert lecture. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. This is a very important subject these days, because India as a modern society is facing several challenges, and it has been since time immemorial a value-based society. The cultural experience of this country has been very long. We know that India has been a permanent settlement since a very long time, and as far as archaeological evidences are concerned, we can say that even in 7500 BC there had been several cultures in the different parts of the country, and so we have a very long history of cultural evolution in our nation. Before going into details about the different important and characteristic features of Indian national culture and its cultural identity and the changes which are occurring in 21st century, we should try to understand first what is culture. So as far as the etymological meaning of the word culture is concerned, we perceive it as the way of life that we follow, that we practice. Culture is actually all about our social, religious behavior, practices, cultic ideas, and language, literature, dance, drama, music that we have produced. So culture actually very is important in context of forming identity of a particular community. As far as historiographical analysis of culture is concerned, culture is little different from civilization. Culture is a generic term, and it actually denotes to the lifestyle of the people living in a particular area, following certain kind of social norms, and the word culture actually is significant in terms of the behavior, language, and several other practices. It includes rites and rituals, it includes the means of livelihood, it includes in itself the social relationship between different families, and in this way we can say that culture is all about the life of the people, their behavior, and their literary and artistic expressions. As far as civilization is concerned, the word is used in a bit distinct sense, and it actually denotes to evolution of urbanism or market economy in one particular region. For example, if somebody takes Harappa as one particular civilization, we can say the use of the term civilization with Harappa actually denotes to the evolution of urbanism in one particular region which had occurred somewhere in 2500 BC. So culture and civilization are two distinct terms, and as I have told you, the culture is a generic term which is actually used in context of the lifestyle and the way of the life of the people of one particular region or one particular community. So if we have to discuss the Indian culture in totality and its changing dimensions in 21st century, it is very important to note that what are the salient features of Indian culture. We know that India is a country of cultural diversity, and we can find apparently that every region has distinct identity. Whether it is the culture of northeast region, or the culture of far south in peninsular India, or it is the northwestern India, everywhere we find there are different languages, different kinds of costumes, different kinds of different other cultural practices. So dance, drama, music, language in India changes in different regions, and this is why the diversity that we find in Indian culture is very conspicuous. It is also important to note that despite apparent cultural diversity, there is underlying unity in perception, and this is one reason that India has been able to unite itself as a geopolitical entity it is today. We have a very long historical and cultural experience which we all share as being Indian citizens. And in this regard, we have to understand that what is the most important feature of Indian culture. So, generally, it is said that Indian culture is a composite culture. Indian culture is a syncretic culture, and this is very true because we don't find that there has been a one single mainstream. You can say a mainstream in Indian culture. Rather, Indian culture is a result of commingling of different cultural traits which actually merge with one another, and which has created a sense of Indianness that we every Indian have. So, when we say India is a country of composite culture, actually we talk about its long historical evolution, historical experience of cultural evolution, and we are always very conscious in our expression that different cultures have come to India, they have traveled down to India, and they got India a very fertile ground for cultural commingling. And examples can be taken from history. We can say when Aryans migrated to Indian subcontinent, they came with new cultural identity and many of new cultural practices. But we find that since the very beginning of Aryan civilization in India, there had been a very deliberate endeavor to include the local traditions with the Aryan traditions, and Atharva Veda is one of the most interesting texts in that we can find the local indigenous cultural ideas were incorporated into the Aryan religious thoughts, philosophy, and many of the local gods later on became part of the Vedic pantheon. Similarly, the advent of Sakas, Scythians, Parthians, Kushanas in Indian subcontinent was very remarkable in terms of cultural commingling, and we have many interesting examples like the adaptation of Adroksho, a Greek goddess popular in northwestern region of Indian subcontinent, was adopted in Indian religion as Lakshmi, and this is very clear from the early coins belonging to Satavahana period, that how in the wake of the new ideas which actually came to Indian main region, the indigenous ideas got an opportunity to intermingle with them, and we will have to appreciate the spirit of India, that we have always adopted the things which have come to us from exotic land, from abroad, but we have Indianized them and then we have adopted them. In the regard of art, we can take a few examples that in Persia or especially in Persepolis, there had been popular an art motif which is actually the depiction of acanthus leaves on the abacus and the capital of the Persepolis pillars. When in India this particular motif was adopted, it was given a new name. It was stylized as per the aesthetics sensibility and aesthetic culture of the country, and it was given a new name, that is Nagpusp. So we have adopted many art motifs in ancient time from different regions, and then we have Indianized them. So mention can be made at this juncture of the Gandhara school of art, where Western style, Western tradition of art actually mingled with the Indian thought and Indian art, and we have been able to produce wonderful images on Buddha and Bodhisattva. And later on, the experiment done at Gandhara was adopted by the artists of Mathura, it was Indianized by the artists of Sarnath and Patliputra, and is somebody who studies actually art will be able to understand this very fact that this Indianization process has been so remarkable, so impressive, so important, that very slowly and smoothly it has digested, adopted the foreign ideas, and it has presented before people such kind of Indianized ideas in a way that people find them truly Indian. So the Indian culture can be appreciated in one way, in one regard, that it actually believes in adaptability. The best ideas, whether they are artistic ideas, whether they are philosophical ideas, or there are religious ideas, India has adopted them, Indianized them, and it has remarkably influenced Indian culture. Another important feature of Indian culture is that it is actually it is a religious-centric culture, and we find that people have been guided by religious ideas, and the sense of cultural unity in India itself is actually based on the idea of religious traveling, you can say pilgrimage from one region to another region. And these people believe that if somebody is visiting to all the 12 Jyotirlingas situated in different nooks and on the corners of the country, or people are visiting to the 4 great dham or the mathas of the country, they will be able to attain a lot of spiritual merit. So this very concept, this kind of mechanism that evolved long back in historical time, it has been allowed people's mobility from one region to another region. And though, as I have told that the diversity is apparent, but whether it is Tamil Nadu, far south, or it is Uttarakhand, we find that in the temples the mantras are same, the ritual practices are same, cultic practices are same, and this has been one of the reasons that India had been able to unite itself as a great cultural nation. Another important thing that we find, that though we have several languages, Konkani, Dogri, and even now Maithili, such languages have been adopted in our constitution, but if somebody is actually knowing about the content of the very essence of the Indian literature, we find again that there is great similarity among the great works, literary works, which were produced in different parts of the country. If there is any study made on the Assamese literature, we find that the literature of Shankardev and Madhavdev in Assam, or the literature of Pampa Pona in Kannada, or the literature of Madhava in or Tikkanna in Andhra region, or the literature of Tirugyan Sambandar or Appar Swami in Tamil Nadu. There is one basic similarity, that all these poets and saints were actually been guided by the theosophic and theistic ideas, and the works which had been produced by them, they are actually in appreciation of Lord Vishnu or Lord Shiva. So we find that the essence of Indian literature is same, and every Indian literature, whether it is the it is the literature of South India, or it is the literature of North India, or it is the literature of North region of the country or the Western region of the country, the role of the ancient Sanskrit literature or classical literature in inspiring the local, you can say, vernacular literature in the country, that has been remarkable. And this is one reason that Ramayana is one important text written composed in Sanskrit by Valmiki, had got its multiple manifestations in different other languages. In Bangla we have Ramayana, in Maithili we have Chanda Jha Ramayana, in Tamil we have Kamban Ramayana. So in different languages we find that Ramayana or Ramcharitra Manas were composed by the different poets. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita had been translated in several languages in beautiful manner, and Ganeshwari, which was written in Marathi, it is one of the best literary product of Marathi language, is actually is the Marathi translation of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So we can say that in real sense India is a country of country where this diversity is very much visible, apparent, but we have an underlying unity in cultural perceptions. This is important to note that the long journey of Indian culture had been very interesting, and India had been an opportunity to actually interface with many cultures. One thing is very remarkable, that we not only adopted many of the foreign cultural traits, we also influenced the culture of the world in a very large sense. And the evangelical missionaries, whether they were actually been for the purpose of promoting academic discourse in the region of China or Korea or in Southeast Asia, but they played a dynamic role in spreading Indian culture to Southeast Asia, to Central Asia, to the region of China. And in later course, Indian culture had greatly influenced the culture even of right from Sri Lanka to Japan. So Indian culture has broadened its boundary in terms of its influence, and we find that in a very broad sense a larger part of Asia was influenced by Indian culture, and we were influenced by the cultures of different Asiatic regions as well. And this is one very remarkable aspect of Indian culture, that in medieval period we have made several experiences in terms of art and architecture, in terms of miniature painting, in terms of dance, drama and music. And we know that till this period, Raga Yamak is one very important raga among the Hindustani classical music, and Yamaka actually denotes to the rag of Yavanas, the foreigners. So India provided a very fertile ground for happy commingling of cultural traditions, and in this regard we may note the significant role of Sufism in India, that it came with certain mystic ideas, but Sufism actually just not tried to impose its sacrosanct ideas on Indian mindset. Rather, it adopted the cultural traditions and values of this country. And the interaction of Sufis with Kanfatta yogis and the mystic saints of this country itself was very important, because the Sufis even studied Amrit Kunde Tantric text that was written in India, learnt a lot from Indians, and practiced Chilla-e Makush, a rigorous austeric yogic practice which was popular among the Indian saints. So, medieval period itself was a great period in terms of cultural experience, and we know not only the religion and society was influenced in several ways, even the food habit of the people was remarkably influenced. And we have very interesting text, Niyamat Nama. A copy of this Niyamat Nama has been received from the region of Malava, and in that we find reference of many of the dainty dishes which are popular till this particular date. And anybody can be surprised to know that whether it is Rasgulla, Gulab Jamun, Imriti or Jalebi, these important confectionaries were not Indian products, they came from the West Asiatic region, from Persia and Arab. So, we have in our culture adopted many things which are of foreign origin, but again the greatness lies in this fact that we have Indianized it. What is another important point, that the colonization of country remarkably influenced the culture of the nation, but a kind of self pride, you can say, on the enduring traditions of the country played as very you can say very powerful role in the cultural renaissance that India experienced in 19th century. I would like to make clear that India has not witnessed one cultural renaissance in long course of history. There had been several cultural renaissance in this country, and 19th century India was also experiencing a kind of modern movement in terms of education, in terms of growth of literature and languages, in terms of growth of scientific education, and growth of educational institutions in the country. But India had also taken recourse to revivalism, and several movements which were started in the country, they had started about the revivalism of the Vedic glory, about the supremacy of the Upanishadic philosophy of Brahma and Atma. So, the 19th century experience of India had been very much remarkable, and this is important to understand that it was in 19th century that India was opened for the Europeans in many ways, in terms not in terms of trade, not only in terms of trade but also in terms of education, art, culture and literature. But India also influenced actually the Western thinking, and we know that many of Indian texts actually had been translated, and especially the philosophy of Vedanta under the capable leader of Swami Vivekananda had influenced the modern thinkers of Europe as well. This is very important that India remained conscious in 19th and 20th century to safeguard its cultural interest, and when the Europeans were quite critical about the Oriental cultural life, India was one country which very boldly resisted against the colonial historiography as well as the Eurocentric views on culture. This is very much evident from the very important works done by revivalists like Dayananda Saraswati, Mahatma Tilak, Swami Vivekananda, Arvindo Ghosh and several others. One thing is very important, that Mahatma Gandhi himself was very proud of India's cultural identity and cultural values of this civilization, especially his in philosophy of truth and non-violence. That itself was based on the religio cultural ideas which originated in India in time immemorial. So Gandhi himself was very proud of in India's cultural identity, and once he had uttered that he wants the windows and ventilators of his countries to be opened so that fresh air must come from different nooks and corners of the world. But he had said he will not allow any powerful gust of wind to come and uproot in Indian culture. So Gandhi was conscious about the cultural identity and the cultural values which were deeply rooted actually in India's social life. This is a very important subject in 21st century, and especially after the concept of globalized world. This world is being considered as a global village, and we are now open to change, open to adopt various cultural values because of the growth of modern means of communication, industrialization, urbanization, changes are occurring taking place everywhere, and we know that these kind of changes are really affecting and influencing Indian culture as well. This is a very remarkable subject in one regard, that how India had actually responded to the Western influence, and this response, that the response which we have given is very interesting in one way, that the cultural life of India, that has been remarkably influenced by many of the foreign traits, but still the enduring traditions of the country, they have maintained their identity. And one example that we can take, that whether it is mantra or ritual of a marriage, its historicity goes back to 1500 BC, and since in that way, since you can say around 3500 years, we have been reciting those mantras, those rituals, and those kind of ceremonies which originated long back in India. So we Indians are very much conscious about the enduring traditions, especially about the higher tradition of the country, which are ubiquitous to almost to the entire Indian subcontinent. However, the values in societies are also changing, and certain changes are required because Indian society today is a progressive society. It's a modern society, and India is making multiple modern experiences in the every walk of life. As far as the values that really matters in Indian context are related to our socio-behavior, socio-cultural behavior. These are related to our marital relationship, and the entire the changes which are occurring must be seen in terms of the Varna order, the Varna and Ashram order, because that has been the very basic theoretical perception that has worked as a supreme principle for Indian society. But this Varna order had really received a great setback, but has really received a great change, because we people now today are not so much conscious about the Varna identity or the identity of caste, especially in urban regions. These kind of perceptions are really changing, and it is because of modern education, which is because of a progressive change that Indian society is facing. So we find that there had been a perception in India that Swavarnashram dharmena tapsahari tosnad. If somebody has to offer his daily ritual or have to go for meditation, then even the ideals of Varna and ideal of ashrama system that should be followed. But this perception, this value has changed in the society, and what actually in matters in educated Indian society today is the education somebody has got, the academic level of a person has become really very important, his earning has become important, and this is one reason that intercaste marriages and cross cultural marriages, they have started taking place in India, because earlier marriage was one very vital issue and it was linked to Gotra, the clan identity, it was linked to caste identity. So there are certain changes in values that you find in terms of caste identity, linked to Varna, identity even linked to region, because in metropolitan cities of the country we find that people from different regions come, they live together, and there are evolving kind of homogenized culture. For example, if we can take Delhi as the national capital of India, you can find that the working population of Delhi is not formed by one state or the local people, rather people from different regions come here, they live here, and they follow the higher tradition of the city. They are inclined more towards a modern cultural life rather than the cultural identities of their own places. You may find certain cultural groups in India, Keralites having their own temples, and people from Odisha having their own Jagannath temple and gathering there on several occasions. But this, apart from that, as far as their cultural behavior is concerned, social behavior is concerned, their cultic practices are concerned, their etiquettes and mannerism are concerned, their language is concerned, there is a new change, a wave of change is very much conspicuous, and a homogenized kind of culture has evolved in Delhi, also in Kolkata. The rate of homogenization is quite fast. In cities like Mumbai even, we find that the people from different parts of the country, they have settled, and Mumbai has also a similar kind of experience. The empowerment of women is another very important issue related with the cultural values of the Indian society, and we can say that since a very long time, historical period, women for Indian society had been a subject of great reverence, and in theoretical terms they had been worshipped as mothers, worshipped as goddesses, and but in real life they had faced several problems, and we know that the society of Indian subcontinent had generally been the patriarchal society or a patrilineal society, except some parts of Kerala, Kerala. Everywhere in India there has been hegemonic control, coercive control of male over their family, and the women were not much educated. The rate of education among women was very low, and they were supposed to do only household works. Somehow this situation has remarkably changed in India, and we can find that whether it is space or it is nuclear science, everywhere the gracious presence of women is being felt, and it can be seen that in school examinations conducted by CBSE in the country, in the exams of class 10th and 12th, the the result of girls students are much better sometimes than the male students, and this shows that how a progressive change is occurring in our society. And whether it is India's corporate world, we can, or India's Silicon Valley, the software industry or education, higher education, the presence of women is really very remarkable. So in terms of the changing values of Indian society in 21st century, the most remarkable change that we find is all about the role of women in Indian society. The women education in Indian society, especially technical and scientific education in Indian society, had been becoming very remarkable, and we know that Indian doctors and engineers, especially female doctors and engineers, they have created their for themselves niche in countries like UK, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and many of the European countries. So the rise of women, Indian women, in terms of their social status, in terms of their economic status, in terms of their participation in political activities, cultural activities, that is very remarkable. And this is one area where India had to go long ahead, but India has shown its real spirit of change in one way, that through education we have provided our women folk a very good opportunity for growth, and this is playing a wonderful role in the overall upliftment of the society. We know that even in the election of local bodies, the women candidates win elections in very good number, and being women, they are always more accountable to the society because they understand the real life problems. So in terms of the role of women in Indian society, the values had started changing. Another important thing that we find, that India's interaction with the whole globe has played a very remarkable role in changing the outlook of the youth in our country, and we find we are living in a country where there are very good number of young professionals, and these people are quite conscious about the modern cultural life. So here you can say that the Western lifestyle and culture is something which is now ingrained in the mindset of the people. As far as education is concerned, we know that country is witnessing the mushrooming of English medium schools, and these English medium schools can be seen in great number in a district town, in a very good number in a district town and a block level town in India. So somewhere Hindi has been peripherized, vernacular languages have been marginalized, and the growth of English education has become very important. One thing is very important, that India doesn't look much conscious about preserving the linguistic tradition of the country, because people had started thinking that English is actually the language which actually gives them opportunity to earn bread and butter. So as far as economic livelihood is concerned, this capital investive education that is a reality now for a country like India. There we find that people are more inclined toward technical education, they are more inclined towards English education, and the vernacular system of education in Hindi medium, it has become a very much neglected subject. Another important area which requires to be discussed, that is actually the arena of Indian art and architecture. This is remarkable to note that in 19th and 20th century, especially right from 1850 to the period of India's independence, there had been made several buildings in our country which actually adopted the European kind of features, whether it is the Victoria Memorial Hall of Kolkata, or it is the Bombay VT Railway Stations architecture, or it is the Rashtrapati Bhavan, or the Umaid Bhavan Palace of Jodhpur, we find that the influence of European architecture is very significant. But this is also remarkable to note that even Baker and Lutyens were not able to completely negate, completely refute the very proposal of adopting a few Indian elements in the building of the President House and the North and South Block. And there we can find, especially in Rashtrapati Bhavan, that the domical superstructure with its balustraded pattern is actually a derivative. It is something which has been actually influenced by the architecture of the stupa of Sanchi. Similarly, the building of Parliament is influenced by the Mitavali temple that is near Gwalior. So, in the field of architecture, a very few interesting experiments were done in early 20th century. As far as development of art and architecture in the 21st century is concerned, you can say we are making multiple experiments. In Rajasthan region, one may find that the old Haveli style of Rajputana intermingled with the Western Corinthian and Gothic kind of architecture has become very prominent, and many appealing buildings have been created there. So there is a trend again of commingling ideas taken from West and Indianizing them. So in 21st century architecture, you may find that a lot of experiment has been done. Somewhere you can find bracketed chhajjas and lattice windows, which are really typical Indian features, but then you can find large and very colossal pillars made in Gothic style and ornamented pillars which are made in Corinthian style. So these kind of examples can be found in different parts of the country. As far as art is concerned, especially painting work is concerned, we know that in 20th century we had been guided by the spirit of revivalism, or whether it was the school of Avinendranath Ghosh or Gagendranath Thakur or Nandlal Bose or Jaimini Rai. They were inspired by the local indigenous Indian traditions, while the modern artists, whether he is Akbar Padamsee or modern artists like Subodh Gupta, they have gone for really new experiments, and you may find that Indian painters have come with new artistic kind of ideas and expressions. So the Indian mindset actually had remarkably changed, and we have just not adopted the Western medium in art. We have actually been experimenting many things new. Some artists, they had been inspired by the local traditions. Some people, there had been artists who had been inspired by the tribal life and culture. There had been, you can say, there have been artists who are actually been inspired by the Western realism. But despite that, we can find that Indian kind of theme, Indian kind of subject matter, they remain important, and especially in paintings of some in important painters. We can take the name of Manjit Baba, where Krishna and his cow, they are very important. And even in the painting of Maqbul Fida Hussain, some of the latest paintings that he did, you can find a few religious symbol from Hindu pantheon and from old classics that had been taken. Whether it is his painting on based on Abhigyan Sakuntalam, or painting series of Gajgamini, you can find the very Indian concept itself of beauty and feminine beauty that had got a new kind of expression, new kind of manifestation. So we can find that India is experiencing modernity in multiple ways, and its several manifestations can be seen, can be visualized in art, its cinema. And we can take example of the cinema, how remarkably in 21st century it has been changing. The journey of cinema right from the time of Dada Sahab Phalke up to this period is actually very interesting. We find that Indian cinema of 20th century was actually been much influenced by the Persian theatre or the local Indian theatre. Even music was greatly influenced by the Persian kind of theatre, Marathi theatre and Gujarati theatre proved very influential in the early decades of 20th century. But later we find that historical narratives and biographies, they played very seminal role in the growth of cinema, and many of the themes that had been taken by Indian producers and directors, actually they were based on historical themes. So films of the earliest 20th century in India, they were inspired by historical themes. Later on we find there had been a period of highly romantic, you can say, cinema, in which new kind of theme was introduced. Then we find that after the Hollywood films, the action films in India also became very, very popular. So in cinema we find that several kinds of experiments had been made, but apart from these commercial cinema, we find that art movies had been made in great number. However, this will be important to quote at this juncture. The cinema of 21st century is again something which is which has, you can say it has two remarkable trends. One, we are really be influenced by the Western music, Western dress designing, the movement and actions that which had been adopted and made popular by the Western cinema. But there is another trend also, that is to idealize the real life issues or real life issues in cinema. So in cinema we can find that there is a remarkable change, and the themes which had been taken by many of the film directors, that had been actually important in context of influencing the Western market, because there had been so very good number of NRIs living in European countries, in US and in America, and the film producers has paid heed to the needs and requirements of that class. Now the diasporic culture in India, because a lot of migration has taken from one region to another region, this diasporic culture and its cultural conservation had become significant. And we find that in a city like Delhi, though I have already discussed that there has been a fast process of homogenization of culture, but cultural clusters have been created in different regions, especially in metropolitan cities of the countries, and there you can find places like Tamil Sangam and Malay Mandir and different Jagannath Mandir, and there you can find that the cultural tradition of the remote areas or far off areas have been carried up to these modern cities, and they are practiced in toto. And the Jagannath Rath Yatra, this procession is one remarkable and very conspicuous event that you can find being practiced and in other parts of the country also, not in Odisha, in different other parts of the country also. Similarly, the Durga Puja or the Chhath festival that you find was popular in the region of Bihar, in the region of Bengal. Now Durga Puja and Chhath, it appears as a tradition ubiquitous to entire India. So the mobilities of the people from one region to another region, that is actually that has started a process of cultural synthesis in India. Somehow the people at this juncture feel in real sense that Indian culture had received threat because of the influence of the cultural influence of the West. And especially in lifestyle, fashion, and metropolitan cultural behavior, especially in terms of language that we use, slangs that we use, appears to be Western, and but this is not true in context to entire India. We know that it's country of crore 128 crores people, and India doesn't mean the 4-5 metropolitan cities. And even in these metropolitan cities, there you can find there are several occasions, especially auspicious occasion, when we show that as far as the cultural tradition is concerned, the cultural values are concerned, we are really very sacrosanct. We have adopted foreign kind of lifestyle, we have adopted European kind of dressage and European kind of hairstyle, which is very apparent. But there is no reason to be critical, because whenever there is any auspicious occasion, we actually feel like stylizing ourselves as a true Indian, and we follow the cultural traditions which are continuing this country since very long time, which have endured up to our period. That's why it can be said that India is in a transition phase, where the Western cultural influence is very much apparent, very much clear, but we have been very much conscious to our religious practices, our sacraments, our rituals, and also to our dress, our dance, drama, and music. This is important to note that in 20th and 21st century, very good number of Sanskrit texts have been produced in the country. So, and very good number of research institutions on Sanskrit and manuscripts, they have been founded, they have been established in this country. So, National Manuscript Mission, that is one example. And now we have a program for documenting the antiquities and monuments of the country also. So, we are preparing a national database on our cultural objects as well. So, the Western influence is of course very much apparent in cultural behavior of our people, but the higher traditions of the country had been so great, and India has been culturally so rich, that there is no threat. If you will say in terms of dress designing, there is no threat to sari, there is no threat to pajama kurta or dhoti kurta, because on auspicious occasion, we culturally conscious people, we think to dress up like true Indian, we think to have those Indian foods which have their time tested value, and even we find that there are different therapeutic measures and medicinal systems in the world. It is the time Ayurveda is reviving. Thank you very much for listening to me with great patience. Thank you.
So, you are satisfied with the way cultural values are being manifested in present time?
Yeah, of course, as I have quoted that now the world is a global village. So, we are open to change, we are adopting new ideas, we are Indianizing them, and I will have to appreciate Indian culture, its real strength. You are living in a cultural arena, living in a cultural continuum that has not evolved in a day, in 100 years or 200 years. It has taken a long time, 5,000 to 7,000 years. So, the mindset we are having, and there is cultural traditions we are having, it is indelible impact on our cultural life, on our temperament, and this is the strength In music, so many experiments are being done. We have Sufi music, we have classical music, we have Hindustani music, we have system of mantra chanting, and these all have got new manifestations.
So, what more need to be done?
What is needed actually is to document the cultural tradition, especially the vernacular cultural traditions are required to be documented, and we need more cultural institutions in the country where the intangible heritage concretized in tangible form may be displayed to the people, especially in terms of languages, especially in terms of dance, drama and music. There are many things which are culturally, socially very relevant in terms of religion, relevant in terms of scientific and ecocentric way of life. So there is need to document them, preserve them and promote them.
So, well friends, with these words I would like to conclude the lecture here, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf I thank Dr. Anand Vardhan for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.